Hi, my name is Natalia. My mother's English and my dad's Italian, and my mum and dad met in England in a town called Scunthorpe, and then they decided to go back to Italy to start a family. So when I was 3 years old, my family decided to come back to England, and I was brought up in Scunthorpe. I was brought up to a father that believed he was the head of the household and that men should go out to work and women stay at home. And I was always taught that I was born to become a mother and a wife, and that was my destiny.
Obviously, growing up with a father that was quite controlling and quite strict, how was that? That must have been quite difficult for you.
Yeah, it was very hard. I wasn't allowed to stay at my friend's house overnight because my dad would say the fathers might rape me. I didn't have Christmas, didn't have birthdays. I didn't understand how my friends could do stuff and I wasn't allowed to do it. So it was very hard.
That made you angry, right?
Yeah, hated life, angry, wish my dad was dead. I used to say to my mum, if you just leave him, everybody will be happy. Because the mood in the house was whatever his mood was in. So that's how you knew the mood of the house was. So I hated all. I used to just count down till I was old enough to leave. So growing up, when I questioned that I didn't want to be a wife and I didn't want to be a mother, I was told that I was wrong and I would get beaten up if I answered back, or if my dad asked me to make me a coffee and I'd say, no, you got feet, do it yourself. I was punished with beatings. And growing up, I was never allowed to go to friends' house to sleep over. I was brought up a Jehovah's Witnesses, so we didn't have Christmases or birthdays. Growing up, it was really hard to live a life where I didn't have any freedom. My friends got to do things that I didn't get to do. It was just had controlling behaviour, and all I lived for was the day that I was old enough at 18 to be able to leave home. When I was 17, I decided to go to the police to see if I could leave at 17, if I had a job and somewhere to stay. And the police told me that I could leave and my dad couldn't do anything. So I went home and told my dad I was leaving and there was nothing he could do about it. And if my friend hadn't heard from me in an hour, she'd be calling the police because I legally could leave. So he couldn't keep me hostage anymore.
That's sad to think that you were obviously in that place. You know, most people not everyone wants to stay at home. I get that. Some people leave home when they're 16 and want their independence, but to be in that sort of frame, to have that relationship and you're constantly living with that over the years, did you build up like a hatred of your dad?
Yeah, absolutely hated him. Yeah, wish he was dead all the time. Hated life, hated my life. Thought I was really hard done by that I'd been brought up, and couldn't understand why everybody had a better life than I had at that time. But there was nothing I could do. I just knew that I had to wait till I was old enough to leave, and then I could make my own choices. You got something on your head? I decided to move with my mum, so she lived in apartments and I lived 2 floors below her. And one day she came knocking on my door and I was having a bath, so I just said, come in. So she came and sat on the toilet while I was having a bath and we was talking. And she told me that the next day she was going to go see my dad because he had some post for her and my brother wanted to see his friends that were there. And I said to my mum, do not hate Dad, like I absolutely hate him. And she said, I love him for who he is, not for what he does, just like you're my daughter. You could do the worst crime ever. I wouldn't justify what you've done or be happy with it, but I'd still love you because you're my daughter. And then she told me that she was scared because she thought my dad would kill her. And I said, you really think he'd do that? And she said, yes, because I'd never seen my dad do any physical harm to my mum, only me. So I said to her, promise me then in the morning you'll come and wake me up, because I was going out clubbing that night. And she promised me she would, that she'd come the next day and wake me up. So I went out that night and I was saying to her as I left, because she had friends round, I was going, bye, love you mum, joking with her. So the last words I ever said to her was, I love you. And then the next morning I woke up with a knock on the door from the police.
How have you, because obviously you talk about it so openly, how have you got to that point?
I've been like that from day one, just open. When people would say, oh, so where's your parents? I'd just say my dad killed my mum. I've never been embarrassed about it. Some family members are, because it's not me, I didn't do it. So you can't judge me on what somebody else has done. But I've had partners where their partner's mother didn't want us to be in a relationship because she was convinced that it's in my genes and that I would kill them. And some people are shocked at it and other people admire it because they think they won't be able to do it. But if you told me that I'd forgiven my father before it happened and that my dad would kill my mum, I'd say to you, no way in hell would I have ever forgiven my father. So till you're in that situation, you can't say what you would do because you don't know. Your body just has to go into fight and flight mode, or it does whatever it needs to do to be able to get through it. Some people will pretend it doesn't happen because that's the only way they can cope. Other people just don't want to talk about it, and privately they'll grieve behind closed doors. Everybody's different, and my motto in life is what other people think of me is none of my business. So if you want to judge me, judge me. I don't, like, you're not living my life.
Obviously, when the police came to your door and were like, knock, 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 what was going through your mind?
I don't think I realised at the time, because I'd been out nightclubbing, I was asleep on the sofa. I found out afterwards, years ago, actually only in the last 5 years, that my mum sent my brother down to get me, and I was asleep on the sofa. So he went back and said, she's asleep on the sofa. And my mum said, oh, just leave her, we'll be fine. So obviously if he'd woken me up, the story could have been totally different. But I didn't ever think he would have done that, because he'd never done anything to touch my mum. He was just more controlling. So I never really deep down thought he would do that. And then I was mad at my mum, because I was like, if you really think that somebody's going to do that, why would you go? Why would you put yourself in that position? Even if you just a little bit think it. So for a little bit, I was mad at my mum that she would do that.
Did you carry that anger with you towards your mum as well? Like?
And also I was like 19. Nobody wanted anything to do with me because I spoke to my dad. I lost all my family. My dad would tell me stories about my mum and keep her alive, and tell me about things that before I was born, after I was born, while nobody else would talk to me about that. And I didn't know how to deal with with it, because there was no internet. You couldn't just Google speak to other people, because there was no internet. So I just had to try and deal with it on my own, and I ended up following the crowd and taking drugs with people, because that was the only way for me to not have to think about it. If I took drugs, then for that moment,
that was your escape.
That was my escape. It wasn't until when you're coming off the drugs that then everything comes back 10 times false, and then you realise that you have to just deal with it. And there was only two ways I could deal with it. I could either end up having a breakdown or committing suicide, or just get on with it, because I can't change the past. I couldn't do it.
And you said you did consider suicide.
Yeah. There was times when I just didn't want to be. I wanted to be with my mum, but there was nothing I could do, and I just wanted to make whatever happened, learn the lesson from it. There's a reason why this happened to me, and the lesson for me was to teach me what unconditional love was. And my mum taught me that by saying, I love people for who they are, not for what they do. And so I don't think, if she hadn't have said that to me, I don't think I would have spoken to my dad again. And if that policeman hadn't have said, you can't do this, I don't think I would have asked to speak to my dad. I would have just asked what had happened. So my life could have gone totally different. And if he hadn't had schizophrenia, definitely I don't think I would have ever spoken to him again.
Do you still blame him?
No, he was definitely ill.
He was ill.
So yeah.
Did you ever have love for him?
Yeah, he had remorse. That's the thing. He would cry and say, if I just knew I was ill, I would never have. Once he'd taken the medication and he could realise what was ill, he wouldn't have done it. So then in them days, my mum, I remember one time, did go to the doctors and say, we think there's something wrong with him. And they said he has to come himself. And she said, well, he don't think there's anything wrong with him, so he's not going to come. And because schizophrenia is a medical condition, it's very hard for you to fake that with a psychiatrist. And my dad, once he was at Rampton, begged to come out of Rampton, because he said, I'd rather be in prison, because here they just drug you up. So he wouldn't have lied about something like that. So it was a genuine condition, which is for me more helpful. And it taught me about forgiveness, and you can't live with that anger. Like, it eats you away, and I didn't want to live a life like that.
That'll ruin your life.
Yeah.
They'll just, and you've got a life to live as well. And I think also, you don't, although there might be early signs and controlling behaviour or schizophrenia and different, mental health issues, but you'd never expect someone to pick up a blade and obviously, be violent that way. Did your parents like get on well a lot of the time?
Well, yeah, my mum was just obedient. She did what she was told. So there was I've never saw them argue or anything. He was just controlling. She couldn't. At one point, he pulled his back and she got a little office job for some money, and he would cycle with her to work and come and meet her for lunch and cycle her back to make sure she wasn't talking to men.
That's really controlling.
Yeah,
isn't
really
it?
controlling. Yeah,
that's bad.
But never physical, and they never argued. Yeah.
But just controlling behaviour, which is, I guess, a form of abuse.
Yeah, she was only allowed friends that were religious because they were good people, because other people drank and smoked and they didn't drink and smoke. So when I got to the police station, I was greeted by my 9-year-old younger brother, all excited that he'd been in a police car and the sirens had gone off. And I looked at the police behind them and said, "Does he know?" And they said yes. So they took me in a room which had my brothers and my sister and my mum's mum there, and a sergeant and a policeman. And the sergeant was very abruptly telling me that there was press outside, we couldn't talk to them. And I just turned around and said, "Can I speak to my dad? I want to see my dad. I want to hear his version of what's happened." And the sergeant was very shouting at me saying, "You can't see your dad." And at 19 years old, he told me I couldn't do something. I was very upset. And I was like, "I demand to speak to my dad." And we got into a bit of an argument, and the policeman actually pulled me aside and explained why I couldn't see my dad, that they were having to do forensics on him. They were still interviewing him. And he said I could write a letter to him, and then tomorrow morning he would pick me up and take me to see my dad. So at that time, my dad, I didn't speak to my dad. I didn't have anything to do with him, but my sister did. So I was worried that if I wrote my name, he wouldn't see me. So I just wrote on the note, "To Dad, I'm trying to see you. They won't let me see you, but they're going to let me see you tomorrow. Love, your loving daughter." And I didn't put my name. I just put that. So my dad wouldn't know who it was. He would think it was my sister. And then the next day, the policeman came and picked me up and took me to see my dad at the police station. So when I went to see my dad, he was behind a perspex screen and he was in like the forensic material, like a carrier bag material. And he was just crying because he was shocked it was me and not my other sister. And my dad's never someone, I've never seen my dad cry. Men don't cry. And he was crying his eyes out. And I just said to him, "If you tell me the truth of what happened, no matter how bad it is, you tell me the truth, but if I hear from anybody that you've lied, then you'll never see me again. And I'm the only person here. So if you want me to continue having a relationship with you, I need to know what really happened." Only since after lockdown, I went finally to therapy, because therapy in England on the NHS is a nightmare, because you've got long waiting lists. And then if you get a therapist that you don't connect with, you're back at the back of the queue. Luckily, I was able to go private and found the one that I wanted. I picked who it was, checked what they were qualified in, what they looked like, because you have to bare your soul to these people and hope that they don't judge you. And therapy has helped me loads, but the therapists I tried to go to didn't help. So I had a lot of damage probably from that.
I think a lot of people do get therapy and they may not get on with it at first. Yeah. Get on with the therapist or go, "That's not for me." But it's about finding the right therapist and the right person that matches you, which is really important for people actually. Yeah. It's important for people to know that.
The first thing she taught me was, you did what you had to do to survive in that moment. And when that one word was like, "Oh, I'm okay," like, I'm okay. What I've done is okay. It's not wrong. And I don't think people have, when it first happened, people used to spit at me in the street saying your mum would turn in the grave if she knew you were speaking to your dad. And I was like, "But you don't know the last word my mum told me the night before. You don't know what she said that to me." My mum was the kindest, quietest, shyest person in the world. She wouldn't do that.
I'll just go back there, sorry. You said people used to spit at you in the street. Why was that?
Because they were people
that's like the worst thing you could do to someone.
Yeah, because there were people that knew my mum. And then I actually ended up living in the house that my dad killed my mum, because when my mum died, I lost my job because I was trying to grieve through it, and I didn't have anywhere to live, so I went back to that house. And people would ring my family and say I was painting red paint on the wall and charging people £10 to come and look at my mum's blood. Like, and it was like, why would you say that?
Messed up.
Yeah, I had men coming in and out of my house. My men were all gay. I didn't have any straight. I never had any straight male friends. They were all gay men.
How can, like, to me, it was like, for me, and I'll just speak for myself here, but I wouldn't be able to move back into that house if that happened. You know, like, how did you do that? Because that must have been, was that not terrifying? And do you not have like endless, like, how did you sleep?
No, it was just weird because I didn't feel, she wasn't there. To me, she wasn't there. If she was anywhere, she was at the house that we left her to, where she loved living there, where it was near the beach and things. I didn't feel anything of her there. The room it happened in, they'd taken all the carpet out, so that was gone. There was nothing to show that anything had happened, apart from there was no carpet. So that was it.
I assume that was for obvious reasons.
Yeah. So he explained to me that he had had a vision from God that said he had to kill my mum's body to save her soul so that they could be together in the afterlife. And so when my mum turned up, he told my mum that she would have to take a punishment if she stayed leaving him. And she thought he meant in the afterlife they won't be together. So she said, I'm ready to accept my punishment. So my dad sent my little brother out to see his friends. He sent my older brother to go get fish and chips. He locked the back door. Then he took the big kitchen knife, went from behind her because she was on the corner of the sofa, stabbed her in the back, but it just bent. So then he ran back to the kitchen and got the smallest knife. At that point, my mum was obviously getting up from the sofa. And then he just stabbed her 15 times on both sides and then laid her in his arms as she was dying. And then I said to him, what was the last words my mum said to you? And she said, everyone will know you're a murderer now. When I found out what happened to my mum, if you'd seen me from the outside, I looked like nothing had ever happened. I was out clubbing, I looked like I was living like a happy life because I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to deal with that emotion. So I just pretended it hadn't happened. I just pretended that my mum was still alive and my dad was not locked up in prison and that I was just on holiday or they were busy or I couldn't have contact with them because I didn't know how to deal with that emotions. I didn't know what to do. It's like the shock had shocked me so much that it just numbed me. I had no feelings about anything. I was just numb and I just did everything like I was in a robot and I was just doing everything that needed to be done. So, but if you'd seen me, you would have thought like I didn't care about mum, I didn't care about my dad because I didn't know how to deal with my emotions as a 19-year-old. I suppressed everything till later on in years to come when I went to therapy and I was able to then release what had happened. When my dad killed my mum, people couldn't understand how I was dealing with it. And to be honest, at first I didn't deal with it. I got into drugs. I got in with the wrong crowd because how do you deal with your mum being murdered by your dad? There was no internet. There was nobody to deal with it. There was no textbook on what to do. So I had to try and find my own way. And I did get lost a lot of the way. Before I figured out how to get through it. So it wasn't all just I woke up, I forgave my dad and everything was happy ever after. For a long time I didn't forgive my dad. I used to go visit him and I'd be screaming and shouting and saying like, how could you do that? It wasn't always I just woke up and forgave him. It took many years before I finally did forgive him for what he'd done. It's not an overnight thing. And I learned that forgiveness is about you, it's not about the other person. So the other person doesn't even need to hear that you've forgiven them. It's about understanding that you can't change the past, you can't change the future, you can't do anything about it, so you have to deal with what's happened. So if you want to live with anger, then you don't have forgiveness. If you want to live with peace and harmony, then you have to learn to forgive people. How I dealt with my mum's murder was by taking drugs. So when I would take an ecstasy tablets, it didn't matter what you told me, I'd be happy as anything because nothing could make me sad. So doing that and for one night meant that I didn't have to worry about reality. I was in another world where everything was good. Going through trauma at such a young age, at that time there was no internet, no help. I did try and go get to therapy, but the therapy wasn't very good at the time because I wasn't a textbook. They didn't know how to deal with that. As I've got older, I then went and found my own therapist and went and got treatment for trauma because you don't realise what happens to you at a young age or through your life growing up, how that impacts you as you get older. I didn't realise that I had a fight and flight response. I didn't realise that I don't do confrontation because it scares me from what's happened to me when I was younger, when I did stand up for myself. I just pretended that my mum was still alive and my dad was not locked up in prison and that I was just on holiday or they were busy or I couldn't have contact with them because I didn't know how to deal with that emotions. I didn't know what to do. It's like the shock had shocked me so much that it just numbed me. I had no feelings about anything. I was just numb and I just did everything like I was in a robot and I was just doing everything that needed to be done. So, but if you'd seen me, you would have thought like I didn't care about mum, I didn't care about my dad because I didn't know how to deal with my emotions as a 19-year-old. I suppressed everything till later on in years to come when I went to therapy and I was able to then release what had happened.
Thanks so much for talking to me. You've been through so much, and you're obviously an amazing woman. That's, you know, you've got your career, you've got your life now, and lovely little dog.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, obviously what you've been through is rare, but you've come out the other side. And let's end this interview on a high. You won an award, if I'm correct.
Yes, I won a Pride of Britain award.
Sometimes people can turn the most unbearable tragedy into an extraordinary gift. And that's just what our next winner, Natalia, has done.
She's given me back my son, really. She's given him a future, which he didn't have.
I haven't got the words to describe what she's done for me.
There are very few of us that have that kind of generosity inside of us.
Please welcome Natalia Aggiano. Beautiful lady. What do you think your mum will be saying to you now?
She'd be very proud.
She would, wouldn't she?
I need to say thank you, though. I wouldn't have been able to do it without my best friend Jo, who was the first person I told and didn't think I was crazy or mad, and was the first person that said, "Who's going to look after you?" "I will," she said, and looked after me for 3 months. And also my brother is with me. I know our mum would be very proud of us today.
It's time now to meet someone that we girls all love. He's a heartthrob, he's immensely talented, and he is a rock legend. Here is John Bon Jovi.
You know, there are those who give of themselves, and then there are those who give of themselves. I mean, you went above and beyond, and you're an inspiration, and you're the inspiration for me, too. I want to thank you.